What you are about to witness is a side of Scottie Scheffler that the golf world has never truly seen before, and this is not speculation, and this is not a manufactured controversy. And every single word of what happened was captured on live broadcast television with microphones. So close that not a single syllable was missed, and it went viral within hours, and it sent a shockwave through professional golf that is still being felt right now. And here at PGA Updates Hub, we are going to give you the full story from beginning to end, because what happened on that 16th hole at Muirfield Village this past Thursday tells you everything you need to know about the state of the most dominant golfer on earth right now, and the answer is deeply uncomfortable. Let us start with who Scottie Scheffler is supposed to be, because context is everything here. This is a man who has built his entire reputation on one thing above all else, and that thing is emotional control. He is the player that other players study when they want to understand how to handle pressure. He is the player that coaches point to when they talk about composure on the back nine of a major. He is the world number one who has won 20 times on the PGA, so we're including 4 major championships, and he has done it all with a calm and measured temperament that has made him look almost robotic in the most complimentary way possible. So when the cameras caught him absolutely erupting at his caddy, Ted Scott, on a live broadcast, the entire golf world stopped and stared, because this was not supposed to be possible. And here at PGA Updates Hub, we need you to understand the relationship between these two men before we walk you through what happened, because it makes the moment even more extraordinary. Ted Scott has been on Scottie Scheffler's bag since late 2021, and in that time he has been present for 19 of Scheffler's 20 PGA Tour victories, including every single one of his 4 major championships. He is not just an employee, he is Scheffler's best friend off the golf course. The two share dinners together, they travel together, they talk about life together, and when Ted Scott was away dealing with a family emergency in 2025, Scheffler publicly spoke about how much he missed having him there, and how Ted's situation was far more important than any golf tournament. And that is the kind of bond these two men have built over years of shared success. And yet even that bond could not survive what the 2026 season has been doing to Scottie Scheffler's mind. And that brings us to the part of this story that makes the memorial outburst so much more alarming. This was not an isolated incident, and that is what nobody is talking about enough right now, because the memorial tournament explosion at Ted Scott was actually the 3rd time in 2026 that Scheffler has shown a version of himself that his fans have simply never seen at the Masters earlier. This year he snapped at a reporter in a post-round press conference, calling the journalist's question terrible on a live microphone, something that was so uncharacteristic that people in the room were genuinely stunned. And then at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, after missing a 10-foot putt, Scheffler took his golf ball and threw it directly into the water, in full view of the gallery and the cameras. And then at the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson, he slammed his club so hard on the tee box after a poor shot that the sound echoed across the course, and commentators were left scrambling for words. And now at the memorial, he has gone after Ted Scott, the man he calls his best friend, on one of the biggest broadcast stages in professional golf, and the pattern here is impossible to ignore. So what is causing this? And why is the world number one unraveling in slow motion in front of millions of viewers? And the answer is one word, and that word is pressure. But not the kind of pressure that comes from a bad tournament or a rough week. The kind of pressure that comes from being the best player in the world and suddenly being unable to win. And Scheffler has not won a single event since the American Express back in January, which means he has now gone 11 consecutive tournaments without a victory. And for a normal professional golfer, 11 events without a win is completely standard and would raise no eyebrows whatsoever. But Scottie Scheffler is not a normal professional golfer. And for a player who dominated the 2024 season with 6 victories and dominated the 2023 season with similar authority, the current winless stretch is already his longest drought since 2023. And the longer it goes, the more the pressure builds. The more the pressure builds, the more the cracks appear. Now let us walk through exactly what happened at the Memorial Tournament on Thursday, June 4th, 2026, because the detail of this moment is what makes it so extraordinary. Scheffler had actually played beautifully. On the front 9, finishing at 2 under par with birdies on the par 5 5th hole and the par 5 7th hole, and he looked sharp and focused, and every bit the 2-time defending champion walking those Muirfield Village fairways. But the back nine turned into a nightmare, and it began unraveling at the 10th hole where a bogey cost him a stroke, and then after a run of pars, he bogeyed the 14th hole as well, and suddenly, all of his hard-earned work on the front nine was completely gone, and he was back to even par, and his body language was telling the story. His shoulders were tight, and his jaw was set, and every missed shot was being met with a look that his longtime fans simply did not recognize. And then he arrived at the par 3 16th hole, which plays 206 yards and has one of the most punishing pin positions on the entire Muirfield Village golf course, and Scheffler and Ted Scott discussed the shot, and they agreed on a 7-iron, and Scheffler stepped up and, by his own admission, hit the ball absolutely flush. He struck it perfectly, but the wind switched, and instead of the ball landing near the pin, it caught the gust and fell into the water hazard next to the green, and that was the moment when everything inside Scottie Scheffler came out, and broadcast microphones caught every word of it as he turned to Ted Scott and said, and we are paraphrasing here, "I never thought that 7-iron was the one. I don't know what to do." And as Scott walked ahead of him, Scheffler kept going and raised his voice and said, "I can't hear a word you're saying," and then continued walking toward the drop zone, saying, "I felt like that was a good shot, and now I'm in the water because the wind came in from the right. Absolutely flushed a 7-iron, and we get the wind wrong, and I'm in the water." And then he delivered the line that has been replayed on every golf broadcast and every social media platform since. "I don't think you understand how frustrating that is. You cannot get the wind wrong," and the cameras stayed on him the entire time, and there was nowhere to hide, and the whole world was watching, and Ted Scott, to his enormous credit, never fired back and never raised his voice and simply kept walking and let his employer vent every ounce of that frustration because, as the broadcast commentators noted in the moment, absorbing Scheffler's emotional outbursts is simply part of what Ted Scott does and always has been. And here is something that the mainstream golf coverage glossed over, but that PGA Updates Hub wants you to understand fully. Ted Scott almost did not take this job in the first place, and the reason he hesitated is precisely because of what we saw on Thursday, because when Scheffler first approached Scott about carrying his bag, Scott had heard stories about Scheffler's temper, and he was genuinely reluctant, and he made it clear that the fiery attitude would have to change before he agreed to sign on, and Scheffler promised that he was willing to work on it, and Scott believed him and got on the bag, and together they built the most successful player-caddy partnership in professional golf in the last several years. And now in 2026, the very thing that Scott feared before he ever picked up that bag is showing up on camera repeatedly in a way that raises a very serious question about whether the relationship between these two men can sustain the pressure that this winless stretch is creating. Scheffler ultimately made a double bogey on 16 and salvaged a birdie on 17 from the fringe, but finished the day at 1 over par with a 73 and was sitting in a tie for 33rd place on the leaderboard, 10 shots behind the leaders, and his second round was no better as he struggled through the front nine, failing to make a single birdie, and at one point shanking a shot from the bunker on the munker. Par 5 fifth hole in a moment that had the Muirfield Village gallery audibly reacting, and he barely made the cut, sneaking inside the line too. Survived the weekend, but the damage to his tournament hopes was already done, and what was supposed to be his coronation as a 3-time Memorial champion turned into a survival exercise. The bottom line is this: Scottie Scheffler is still the best golfer on the planet, and his results prove it, with second-place finishes at the PHL, Masters, and other signature events, showing that the talent is absolutely still there, but something is shifting inside the most mentally strong player of his generation. And the outburst at Ted Scott at the 2026 Memorial Tournament was not just a bad day and a difficult wind, it was a window into a mind that is feeling the weight of expectations in a way that it has never felt before. And here at PGA Updates Hub, we will be watching every single round between now and the US Open at Shinnecock Hills to see whether Scheffler can find his game and his composure before the biggest stages of the year. Demand both of them at once. Stay subscribed because this story is absolutely not finished.